Hello, everyone. How are you doing today? We'll just get a couple more minutes here before let some other people join here. So be sure to pull up the chat window. I've got the chat window here, and let me know where you're calling in from and maybe what type of projects you're working on. I'm located here in central Canada, and we've had a surprisingly warm fall this year. Yesterday was actually raining. It would normally be very cold here in central Canada. Winnipeg is known as Winterpeg, but it's been surprisingly warm, and I can still see green grass out my window. But that's all going to change this afternoon. I think we're getting a big snowstorm later today, so we'll get our taste of winter and we'll get our white Christmas here yet. We'll let a few more people join and just get started here shortly. Let me get my screen share going here. That's the one there. Okay. So, hello, Guilherme from south of Brazil, FPSO project. So you'll definitely find this presentation interesting, and I hope I can help you out here. All right, so it is 10 o'clock in the morning here on December 8th in central Canada, so we can probably get started. So today's presentation is on how to plan and execute capital project commissioning so that you can stop losing time at the end of your projects. You're going to get the #1 project management framework to lead and manage commissioning. So this presentation is meant to be interactive. I've got the chat window up here. You can pull it up here as well. And if you have any questions as we're going through the presentation, shoot them into the chat window. I'll watch for questions and we'll get them answered as we go along here. We'll also have a Q&A at the end of the presentation where we can get any of your additional questions answered too. So definitely feel free to shoot your questions into the chat and I'll get them answered as we go through this so that I can help you with commissioning. Now, you're going to want to stay to the end as well. I've got something that's actually quite interesting for you. It's a brand new piece that we've added to our program, and it's only for you since you've joined this webinar live. It's not some lame PDF document that you don't actually want and you're never going to read. It's something you actually need and want for commissioning. So I'll tell you how to get access to it at the end of this presentation. So be sure to stay to the end so that you don't miss it. Now, I've been using these commissioning project management frameworks we're going to discuss today on several projects. I've used these commissioning project management frameworks in the power industry, building power generation projects and HVDC transmission projects. I've used these in the aerospace industry, building satellites and rockets for the Canadian Space Agency. I've also used these same commissioning project management frameworks in the water treatment industry, expanding and upgrading wastewater treatment plant facilities. I'm also on the organizing committee for the Commissioning Professionals Society, where we host an annual event in Houston, Texas, and have all the best and brightest commissioning minds in one room where we discuss some of the challenges faced by the industry and how to elevate the importance of commissioning on projects. And I'm not the only one getting results with this approach to commissioning. Through our training, I've helped several others get these same results on their projects. For example, Sheldon or Jonald or Kale and many others. After joining our program, they all tell me that this was an eye-opener. They had no idea what was fully involved in properly planning for commissioning. They tell me that this was the most interesting and applicable course they've taken in years with lots of practical information. This isn't theoretical stuff from a textbook. They tell me that this is the first commissioning explanation they found that fully matches with what really happens at site. And that's because it is. It's based on real world experience. This isn't theoretical nonsense that's not going to help you on projects. So I know that this is great stuff and it's helping a lot of people and it can definitely help you on your projects too. So just to be clear though, this is not technical commissioning. If you're here looking for how to do an electrical high pot test, or if you're looking for building commissioning HVAC test and balance, this is not ASHRAE or NEBB or some of those more simple building commissioning processes, or if you're here looking for specific pipe flushing standards for the food processing industry, you're not going to find any of that here. That's not what this presentation is about. But technical commissioning is not actually what's missing on projects, though, is it? There's a lot of smart people working on projects, and they'll get the testing completed one way or the other. What's missing on projects are the project management aspects that are supposed to go around the technical commissioning. What's missing are the systems and controls to manage commissioning starting much earlier in projects. Let's look at a simple org chart. The three main functions on projects, of course, are you need to get it designed, you need to get it constructed and installed, and you need to get it commissioned once everything's complete installation. Or if you have an EPC contract, your design and construction groups are part of the same function, and that's okay too. This all applies to any contract delivery structure. Too often, though, commissioning is tucked under one of these existing groups. You may have your design group responsible for commissioning, or maybe commissioning is just a sub-activity to one of the construction groups. And projects are often structured this way right from the beginning in contracts, and they're already in trouble before they even start. There's typically someone that's responsible for managing the design. You would have a design manager coordinating all the aspects of design. And there's definitely someone managing construction, because there's an entire industry that's dedicated to construction management. But where are the project management processes to lead and manage commissioning? On a lot of projects, they don't even exist. There's a gap in the industry. Commissioning is really still in its infancy. Of course, we've been doing commissioning for decades, but it's only recently that commissioning is being recognized as its own discipline and recognized as a primary function to successfully complete projects. Some industries, of course, are ahead of others in this regard. The aerospace industry is the most advanced, and you can check out some of the other material I've published on commissioning of the James Webb Space Telescope. That's precision commissioning, because that stuff has to work. The oil and gas industry is quite advanced as well, due to the obvious safety hazards and logistical challenges of working offshore. So they've developed quite a lot of these processes for proper commissioning project management of oil and gas projects. But commissioning as a discipline is only now starting to emerge in several other industries. Now, commissioning is complex, both the technical aspects and the project management aspects. And I will say that you can't learn technical commissioning in a course. I'm sorry. The only way to learn technical commissioning is to be part of an experienced team and get that important hands-on experience on site, right? It's just too dangerous. There isn't anyone that's going to tell you how to do, say, a high voltage, high plot test on a large synchronous condenser and then send you on your way and hope it goes well. It's just not going to happen. You have to be part of a team that knows how to do this safely, to see how it's done and ensure that everyone's working safely to perform these very hazardous commissioning tests. It's like a kid riding a bike. She's not going to learn how to ride a bike by reading a book. She's got to get on the bike. She's got to get the bumps and bruises if she wants to figure it out. Now, there is a distinction between technical commissioning and commissioning project management, and they do require different skill sets. And when it comes to commissioning project management, you can learn this, and you must learn this in advance before trying to lead or manage commissioning. It's similar to surgery. Do you want a surgeon in the operating room trying to figure out what to do on the fly? Of course not. You want the surgeon who has studied the process and knows the exact steps to follow, including when something goes wrong. It is way too risky to figure out how to manage commissioning on the fly. There's just too much time and money at stake, right? And it's not reasonable to expect the technical commissioning experts to figure this out. By the time they're involved in the project later, it's already too late in the project, and they have their own tasks to complete anyways. The bad decisions early in the project have already been made by the time they get to site. For project managers, they especially need to know how to complete projects properly during commissioning. I would honestly say that finishing projects during commissioning should be a project manager's most fundamental role, right? To make sure the project can actually be finished on time. But it's not project managers' fault that they don't understand the commissioning process. This stuff really isn't explained in any project management literature that's out there. completing projects during commissioning is not well understood by a lot of people. So with this gap in the industry and this missing commissioning project management function on a lot of projects, it's no wonder that projects are late and over budget. And this is the gap that we help you fill. This presentation is for project managers that need to understand how to finish projects during commissioning, and also for technical commissioning experts that want to move up in projects to lead or manage commissioning. With the gap that exists in the industry, when there's no systems and controls to manage commissioning, projects are just gambling. You have no way to affect the outcome of your project. You just roll the dice and hope for the best at the end. It's a complete crapshoot. I'm going to show you how to finish projects during commissioning with much more predictability. And at the end of this presentation, if you'd like more help, I'll show you how with our Commissioning Academy program. So if this all sounds interesting, then I'm glad you're here. I want to share some statistics with you that are quite concerning. This is Professor Bent Flibberg. He's from the University of Oxford. And over the last few decades, he's developed a database of over 16,000 projects. And he's also written a book. It's called How Big Things Get Done. If you haven't read it, you should read it. It's an excellent book. Professor Flibberg's research shows that only 8.5% of projects are on time and on budget. That means that over 90% of projects are late and over budget. That's terrible. The construction industry has a terrible track record and has a lot of challenges for sure. There's, of course, a lot of things contributing to construction project delivery underperformance. There's huge challenges with civil activities, heavy civil work, underground conditions. There's, of course, procurement delays for long lead equipment. If we've got 6-month lead time for equipment and getting that stuff to site is a challenge for sure. Construction productivity, if there's large quantities of concrete to pour and ensuring productivity rates are being met to achieve those objectives. There's certainly lots of challenges on projects. And I don't want to discount some of those other challenges like the civil works. We've got experts that are focused exclusively on working on some of the other challenges on projects. However, the complexity of completing projects during commissioning is one of the main contributions to delays when there are no systems and controls to manage commissioning. I'm going to show you how to do this on your projects so you can beat these odds and improve your project success. So let me know in the chat, is this making sense? Does any of this concern you? Have you seen any of this on projects, or have your projects been able to beat these odds and deliver on time and on budget? Let me know in the chat what some of your experiences have been on projects. So the first thing a lot of people want to know is what to do. They just ask me, just give me the checklist or just give me the procedure. I just need to know the step-by-steps of how to commission a project. Just tell me how to commission a combustion gas turbine, for example, or just tell me the software to use. I'll follow that. And when I hear these questions, I already know that these projects are in trouble because there's a little bit more to it than that, right? You're never going to find a single document that shows you the steps for commissioning. So first, let's address the problems of what not to do before we talk about what to do. We know that projects are having problems. We know this because the data tells us that 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget, right? Projects are losing time during commissioning and they're missing their critical milestones. But why is this? Why are projects struggling? We need to address these problems before I teach you what to do. There are 3 common mistakes that are made on projects, and just by fixing these 3 mistakes, you'll be able to see a huge improvement on your projects. So what are these 3 mistakes? Mistake number 1, we've been told for the longest time that commissioning takes place at the end of projects. You need to finish construction and then you test everything at the end, right? But this is actually not true. This is, of course, what most projects do. They roll the dice at the end and hope for the best, right? And maybe you've had this experience on projects, but this is what leads to problems on projects. In fact, to be successful with commissioning, the commissioning process starts right at the beginning of your project during the FEED process, or even earlier. When commissioning is left to the end, there's no way to be proactive. All the problems are left at the end of the project, and there's no time to recover, and you won't be able to deliver your project on time. It's exactly like Stephen Covey says in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. Habit number 2, begin with the end in mind. We must be doing this on capital projects and having commissioning project management processes right from the start. There's no way to successfully finish projects unless you start preparing in advance. All projects that have ever finished on time and on budget, this is what they're doing. They're implementing commissioning project management right at the beginning of their projects. And I'm going to show you how to do this. Mistake number 2. On many projects, there's one group that's tasked with commissioning, right? Maybe commissioning is a sub-activity to your construction groups, or commissioning is the design group's responsibility. Nobody really wants to deal with it, so it's tagged with one of the existing groups and say, you guys figure this out. But this never works. Commissioning is not an individual effort. Commissioning must be treated as its own discipline with all project groups involved. Each project group has their primary role, right? The design guys, we need them to focus on getting the systems designed, obviously. And the construction groups, we need them to focus on their area of expertise, getting the equipment installed. And we need these groups to focus on their primary responsibilities. But when we give them the responsibility of commissioning as well, of course, they're going to leave this to later, right? They need to focus on their primary role and worry about commissioning later. And this is what causes commissioning to be forgotten about until it's too late. Instead, commissioning requires a one-team approach with everyone focused on their primary responsibility and everyone involved in commissioning. All subsystems must come together as one functioning plant process, right? Or one functioning subsystem or system. And the project groups must do the same to all come together at the end for commissioning. All groups have a role as part of the commissioning team. The construction groups have a role. They may be involved in some of the vendor startups, so that since they're managing the procurement, the equipment installation, and the vendors involved in that, they're involved in coordinating vendors for some of the vendor startups and site acceptance testing. The design groups are involved. That's where a lot of our subject matter experts are coming from, the equipment experts that are the transformer experts or other equipment experts. They have a role as part of the commissioning team. There's consultants that are involved. The client is involved. The commissioning team is involved. Everyone has a role in commissioning for a one commissioning team approach and one commissioning process to follow. So it doesn't matter which group you're part of, there's one commissioning process to follow with a one team approach and one final finish to the project. Unfortunately, when commissioning is a sub-activity to one group, this leads to a conflict of interest, right? You can't have the fox guard the hen house. Think about it. There's lots of money involved and there's cost pressures, there's schedule pressures. And when groups are under pressure to deliver, it's human nature to try and cut corners. You can't fault anyone for that. They're trying to achieve their primary objectives, right? But you can't have one group verifying their own work. All projects that are successful with commissioning, they have one team with everyone involved, one commissioning process, and one final in-service date. This, of course, is extremely challenging, right? Because everyone belongs to different organizations and contracts naturally divide everybody up. So how do you keep everyone aligned for successful commissioning? I'm going to show you how to do that today. Mistake number 3, many projects, they're still using paper and spreadsheets from a few decades ago to manage commissioning. They've got paper sign-offs, or they're using their all singing, all dancing custom spreadsheet to manually track their commissioning. And while this used to work 20 years ago, projects are far too complex now. There's just too many documents and too much information, and it's impossible to keep track of manually. We need real-time data to make real-time informed decisions on our projects. We can't wait until Friday's spreadsheet update to get the most current information to make decisions on our projects. Projects are moving much faster than that. We need access to information now. So even if you've used commissioning software in the past and weren't impressed by it, there are much better options available now that can meet your project needs. And I'm going to show you which is the best software to use and how you can get access to it. There are actually over 20 different software vendors that are on the market. Each has its own pros and cons. Some have better capabilities than others. And there's actually some that you completely want to avoid because they're missing critical functions. I've reviewed each of these and I know which is the best option for you. And our Commissioning Academy program helps you select the best one for your projects. If you don't have this list already, you can download it at learncsu.com. There's a link at the bottom of that page where you can get access to this PDF and you can see the entire list of software systems that are available for commissioning. There are really three fundamental questions that your CMS software needs to answer. The first question it needs to answer is what? What needs to be done on the project to finish it, right? The second question it needs to answer is when. So you've got a list of activities, but when does each need to be completed to align with your commissioning and startup process, right? Your time component, your schedule, that needs to be incorporated into your commissioning software as well. And then the third question your commissioning software needs to answer is who needs to do each of those activities? Who is responsible to get it done? What, when, and who? If your commissioning software can't answer these questions in a crystal clear manner and convey to everyone on the project the answers to these three questions, then you can't use it. It's not software that's going to help you on your projects. If your software only identifies what needs to be done, then you know what? You might as well stick with your spreadsheets because Excel can give you a list of activities. You need software that actually helps you manage the work, not make things more difficult for you. And not all the software can answer these three questions of what, when, and who. Not all software does a great job of integrating schedule into managing the work. You need to make sure you get software you can actually use on a daily basis. When you get the right CMS software, it helps you plan and manage construction completions and technical commissioning. It helps you keep track of all the big details and all the small details so that nothing gets missed. It's what's used to manage your gated commissioning workflows and keep track of all the subsystems as they're in various states of completion. And it allows you to make real-time, data-driven decisions rather than guessing on your projects. Now, we can't expect everyone on projects to understand commissioning, right? Everyone has their own zone of genius in how they contribute to the project, like we talked about earlier. And commissioning is complex. Not everyone is going to get to that level of detail that the commissioning team does, right? But we do need to have a tool that allows everyone to see how their role contributes to a successful project finish. Everyone needs to understand very clearly what they need to do and when they need to have it done to align with our commissioning and startup sequence. And CMS software, when used properly, is that tool to guide the team to a strong finish. We certainly don't want to take a bad commissioning process and digitize it, right? You need to understand commissioning project management before working with these tools. And if you have poor commissioning processes, then software isn't going to help you fix that. Instead, we want to use software to model the best commissioning workflows so we can manage and track the work. Now, remember at the beginning of this presentation, I said that you will want to stay to the end. Well, since you're attending live, I'm going to show you how to get trial access to the #1 rated commissioning software on this list so that you can check it out and learn how to use it. And it will definitely help you on your projects. So be sure to stay to the end to learn how to get access. So these are the three common mistakes that are made on projects: not starting with the end in mind, having commissioning as a sub-activity to other groups, and still using paper and spreadsheets to manage commissioning. These are why projects are struggling with commissioning. And if you fix just these three things, you've already made a huge improvement on your projects. When projects are making one or more of these three mistakes, it's because they lack a project management approach to commissioning. And this is what we refer to as cowboy commissioning. Cowboy commissioning is inefficient, you're missing your deadlines, everything is unplanned and unorganized, and it's the reason that commissioning is a shit show at the end of your projects. It's easy to avoid these mistakes with commissioning project management processes, and I'm going to show you how so your projects can avoid cowboy commissioning. So good to see you, IO, for just joining now. Let me know if there's any questions in the chat before we move on. Is this making sense? Let me know just while I grab a drink here. All right, so these are some of the symptoms of cowboy commissioning and some of the problems you may be experiencing on your projects. You may be, one of the problems you're experiencing is your transition from construction to commissioning is disorganized and incomplete. There's no project management process to have construction completions, determine that line in the sand when construction is complete, and allow pre-commissioning and commissioning teams to move on with the work, to know that they have what they need for commissioning. We see this often on projects. That one of the problems that exists is a disorganized transition from construction to completion. Another problem you may be experiencing is that commissioning is delayed due to constant snags. Everybody's definition of done seems to be something different, right? The commissioning team's definition of done, the construction team's definition of done means something different. And when you move into commissioning, you're constantly finding things that are missing, a missing cable, a rolled wire, a missing VFD setting. And even though these are small little things, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. All these small little things, you're getting delayed and held up everywhere you turn, and you're constantly snagged during commissioning, and you just can't make any progress. Commissioning is squeezed into half the time. I think I'm describing like every project that ever has existed, right? Is if there was 6 months for commissioning, by the time you get there, there's only 3 or 2 months left. So it's common 16-hour days to try and recover, 7 days a week scrambling at the end to try and make up the time, right? And it just never happens. And you're losing time during commissioning, and you're ultimately missing your project in service date, right? So some of the mistakes that we see on projects is projects are often following outdated commissioning processes. Your commissioning is disorganized, not because you're missing technical commissioning, it's because you're not following the more advanced commissioning project management processes required for today's complex projects. You can go back and look at some of the old standards that were written 20 or 30 years ago, but they no longer apply. Obviously, a lot has changed since these standards were written, with a lot more integrated systems on projects and a lot more information that's generated as we go through our project deliveries. Besides, these outdated processes are what has led to 9 out of 10 projects being late and over budget for the last several decades. So it makes no sense to learn and follow what's clearly not working. The way it's always been done has really never worked, has it? Instead, we need to get away from these outdated industry norms and implement commissioning project management processes more suitable for today's projects. More sophisticated standards such as CFOS with more sophisticated tools to manage commissioning must be implemented to generate the results we need on projects. And our Commissioning Academy training is based on these more modern systems and processes for commissioning project management. So another mistake we often see is that there's no systems-based approach through all stages of projects. And this is one of the main reasons to have commissioning teams involved earlier in projects, is to go through that project systematization efforts and have that subsystems-based approach through design, through construction, to align with our commissioning and startup process. If everything's out of sequence, then it's not aligning exactly with our startup sequence, everything gets mixed up and there's no way to have a strong finish. So we need to be having this subsystems-based approach starting early during our feed processes to have design, construction, and commissioning align through all stages of the project. Another mistake we see is that projects are still planning from left to right. It's very common on projects, right? You figure out some design and then you go work on construction, and then commissioning is left over to the end. And that never works on projects. You'll never meet your project in service date planning from left to right. The only way to complete commissioning successfully is to begin with the end in mind. And that means starting with your project in service date and planning the project from right to left, right? There's only one project in service date. What you need to do to meet that, you need successful commissioning and startup. What do you need for successful commissioning and startup? You need this, this, and this from construction. What does construction need to hit their milestones? They need this, this from design. The only way to successfully plan a project is from right to left. Another mistake we see is that only a handful of people understand what's actually required for commissioning. And this is common, right? Commissioning is complex, and it's not reasonable to expect everyone to be a commissioning expert. However, it's also not helpful when only your commissioning experts know what's required for commissioning, and then they get to site and they're upset that things are missing or they don't have what they need to proceed with commissioning. Well, everyone needs clear instruction on what is required, even if they don't understand commissioning. They need to know what they need to do and when they need to do it, so that the commissioning experts, when they get to site, have what they need to complete their portion of the job, right? And without some comprehensive method to track all the details, not everyone is aware of what is required. Having details buried in an outdated spreadsheet is not going to help you on your project. We need to be using software as a communication tool to help everyone understand what is required for commissioning, so that not just a handful of our commissioning experts know what's required and everyone else is just guessing. Another mistake we see on projects is that you're using contracts to get the work started, but you're not using contracts as a tool to also finish the projects. When you look at a lot of contracts, they're usually pretty light on commissioning details. Maybe they have some of the technical commissioning requirements, but they're likely missing the commercial and project management requirements for commissioning. And this is what leads to a lot of confusion later at the end of your projects, because you end up spending more time arguing in meetings about what to do for commissioning rather than actually focusing on the project processes that should have already been defined in contracts on how to complete the end of the project during commissioning. So is this making sense? I see some good comments there. Fantastic delivery, interesting, thanks. So let me know in the chat if this is making sense, or if any of this sounds like your projects, if you had some of these experience. So Godwin is asking, what is the difference between systematization and systemization? They're exactly the same thing. I think people just choose one word or the other. I'm not sure which is the right one to use, but they mean the same thing. It's the process of taking your project tag list and defining which tags are part of each subsystem and how they're going to flow through your commissioning workflows from start to finish of your project. So I use systematization. I might use systemization sometimes, but they're the same thing. All right. Connor's asking, do you ever partial systems? So I assume that you're asking, do you ever get partial completion of a subsystem? So that depends on your project systematization. If through how you systematize, for example, a network of vent pipes, yes, that depends on how you systematize your project. I would suggest that you systematize it that way right from the beginning, that if you take a subsystem, you want to split it into a half or into smaller components, because that's how you're going to start up the system, or that's how you can work with some of the pre-commissioning activities, then that's how you need to systematize your project. And that's why it needs to be defined early in the project, so design and construction teams know what they need to complete, right? If you're only looking for the network of vent pipes, then you need to define that as one of the subsystems to complete to align with your static completion. If that's part of a larger subsystem, that's okay, but you need to define your tag list of how you want that handed over from construction to commissioning. When that doesn't happen, and there's smaller pieces, and then the construction group starts talking about, well, can we hand over this smaller piece and that smaller piece? That's where you run into lots of problems during that transition from construction to commissioning. And that's when you lead to cowboy commissioning and scrambling, when you've only got a piecemeal approach of finishing the project. So that's why it needs to be defined very clearly up front, so there's no surprises. All right, so let's get into some good stuff here. There are 3 parts of the commissioning project management framework. The first part is your planning frameworks for commissioning project management. The second part is your construction completion frameworks for that transition from construction to commissioning. And the third part is your on-site commissioning and startup project management frameworks. These are what make up the integrated commissioning framework. When the integrated commissioning framework is established early in projects, your on-site commissioning becomes so much easier. You're able to complete commissioning with ease. There's no delays. There's very few snags. Of course, there's always going to be a few small items, but the number of snags is significantly reduced. You have confidence that you can meet the deadlines on your projects. Your projects save significant time and money by completing projects more efficiently. And most importantly, we're able to deliver quality systems that can be used for decades of reliable operation. However, when you're missing these commissioning project management frameworks, it may seem like you're making progress on your projects until you get to commissioning, right? And nothing works, things are missing, and there's constant delays. The commissioning guys are blamed on everything not working, but this is only because of the missing project management frameworks that weren't invoked earlier in the project to align with commissioning later. You lose time during commissioning, you're scrambling to get things finished, and you're panicking to try to keep your head above water, as I imagine executives are breathing down your neck demanding results, right? What you end up with is cowboy commissioning at the end of your project. Without commissioning project management frameworks on projects, what do project teams do to try and fix this? Well, it's all too common for everything to get dumped on the commissioning guys at the end of the project to sort it out, right? They're treated like the wizards, is they can make everything better. Just don't worry about it. The commissioning guys will finish that later. There's 16-hour days or 7 days per week to try and recover. And I guess the plan is just to cross your fingers and hope that the project will eventually end. But we know that hope is not a plan, right? The blame game starts, finger pointing of what went wrong, and the claims start to pile up. I guess the plan is just to fight it out in court, and this is how a lot of projects end, right? But this is hardly a good approach to projects, and there is a better way. By implementing these commissioning project management frameworks early on your projects and establishing the defined processes to follow and the specific controls to monitor the progress, there's no surprises, with an easy to follow process right from the beginning of projects that everyone understands. You have the project management controls that you need to make informed decisions and affect the outcome of your project. Commissioning goes much smoother with no delays or no snags. How's this sounding? Is this making sense? Or maybe this is sounding too good to be true? Have you worked on a project that has completed in this manner? Or have most of your projects ended with cowboy commissioning? I know this is possible because this is what I do on projects, and I've seen projects successfully complete this way with commissioning project management processes. So if this sounds too good to be true, it's actually not. It's very possible when you're implementing commissioning project management on your projects. Okay, so these are the details of what's included in each framework. But first, why is it called the Integrated Commissioning Framework? Well, that's because commissioning project management must be integrated into all early stages of projects. During procurement, during design processes, we need to be involved during construction or during our construction completions as well. So Dan is saying, sounds too good to be true, but you're making me a believer. It does sound too good to be true, but this is how successful projects are executed. Most projects don't do this because they don't follow commissioning project management processes. But when you do follow commissioning project management processes and everything that we talk about here today and everything that we teach in our Commissioning Academy program, it's all very possible. And it's actually not as difficult as you would think. Gautam is asking, at what stage do CMS software engineers engage on a project, DED or FEED? As early as possible. Before contracts are even awarded, you at least need to be defining your commissioning software processes and expectations for groups working on the project of how they're going to be using this software. If you issue contracts and don't have any of that defined, good luck trying to get everybody to do that later. If it's not in the contract, of course, they can do that for you with a cost, of course, right? So all of how your project is going to be finished, including your commissioning software, needs to be defined up front in contracts, or it's a nightmare to sort out later. How do you deal with a project with constantly changing design? That's always a challenge. And really, if the design is changing and it's not defined enough, then it probably wasn't time to start the project. One of the points that Ben Flivberg makes in his book is think slow and act fast, right? That think slow component is figure out what the project is going to be and how it's going to be executed before you actually go execute it. So that's not a good way to start projects. When you end up in that manner, then that's how commissioning software can help, is if the design guys are struggling with some of the changes, at least you've given them a deadline of when they need to figure out their issues and have a defined design by the milestones given our commissioning software. Anything past that, then cowboy commissioning is what you get. Fast track projects. Yeah, well, that's probably because there was no definition of how the project was going to be complete, and probably the project was planned from left to right. When projects are planned from right to left, then you know what the deadlines are, and you're going to hit some delays, of course, but you need to know what's required to pick that up. When you're fast tracking projects, that's because you had no upfront milestones to completely miss design deliverables, completely miss construction deliverables, and yeah, your project's not in good shape. All you're really doing is cleanup mode at that point. Okay, so remember we talked about one commissioning process to follow through all stages of the projects, right? We need one commissioning team with one commissioning process, regardless of which group you're part of. It's the only way so that all of this comes together at the end of the project. Let's go through each framework that's on the screen. The planning framework has 10 project management frameworks, with the first one being contracts. So commissioning it needs to be integrated into contracts to define what's required from our design processes for commissioning, what's defined from construction groups for commissioning, and also what's required during procurement. So when procurement contracts are being awarded for a lot of the equipment, how is this equipment being tested in the factory? What offsite testing is being completed so that things align with what's going to take place with our on-site commissioning? We need to be using contracts to define how the project is going to be completed during commissioning and startup, not just using contracts as a tool to get the work started. If that's the approach, then you'll end up with cowboy commissioning. So our next project management planning framework is our feed processes. A lot of projects are terrible at implementing lessons learned, but this is the process to incorporate those lessons learned. You've probably been involved in projects that have gone through lessons learned exercises, but then those are quickly forgotten about and filed away and never actually implemented on the next project. Well, this is the process to do that, is to have some of our project end processes during commissioning and startup and operations participating in our early feed processes during preliminary design reviews, during detailed design reviews, to make sure that what's taking place during design 2 or 3 or 4 or even more years in advance is aligned with what's actually required for successful commissioning and startup later in the project. When this feedback loop is broken or doesn't exist at all, then there's no way to know if what's being designed is actually going to be able to be implemented in the field later. Lots of projects will go through a constructability review, but there's also a commissionability review and an operability review, and that feedback needs to be applied earlier in the project during some of our design processes. And there's some more detailed design packages that will require an even more in-depth review when you get into some of our process control narratives or controls equipment, control and protection equipment. Some of those systems may require an even more detailed review on, say, a weekly review or workshops to make sure that process control narratives are being prepared correctly, are being interpreted correctly by those that are implementing our control logic, and that we're actually going to get systems that are going to work at the end of the project during commissioning. If that feedback loop doesn't exist, then there's a complete disconnect between the beginning of your project and the end of your project, and there's little chance of success at the end. So the next planning framework is our factory acceptance testing and our integrated factory acceptance testing. We'd be very familiar with some of the common factory acceptance testing on some of the common hardware. If we're going to test a pump in the factory and run it for a few hours and test 3 points on the pump curve, a lot of that basic equipment testing, we've been doing that for years, and there's not too much involved there that we don't already know. But when it comes to some of the more complex systems, say like our control and protection equipment, we need to be doing proper integrated factory acceptance testing to test both the hardware and the software in the factory to make sure that these more complex systems are going to work when they get to site. I do have a case study coming up in the presentation here, and I'll show you 2 different approaches to integrated factory acceptance testing and how that turned out on one project or the other, where the one project did take an integrated factory acceptance testing approach and the other one didn't. I'll show you that case study here shortly. So the next planning framework is our project systematization. This is one of the reasons that the commissioning team needs to be involved early in projects to define how the project is going to be systematized into subsystems so that the subsystems-based approach can take place through design, through construction, and through commissioning, so that all phases of the project align identically with the project startup process. If there's anything that's out of whack there, then projects don't have much of a chance of aligning with startup and a successful in-service date. We need to be defining our gated commissioning workflows. So as we're going through construction completions, pre-commissioning, commissioning, and startup, what are these gated commissioning workflows looking like? Are we having discipline-specific completions? Are we having subsystem completions? And how is each subsystem applying through each of these workflows and transitioning through these workflows during the various stages of completion to get to eventually to startup? So we need to define what our gated commissioning workflows is going to look like as we go through the process. Connor, who is responsible for organizing third-party inspections before commissioning for, let's say, ATEX systems or high voltage, medium voltage power? Every country has different requirements. So there definitely is a distinction, and it's a very important distinction between construction quality management and our commissioning process here. I suspect in what you're referring to for third-party inspections before commissioning is exactly that, our construction quality management processes. So from a commissioning perspective, we have a very keen interest to know that the construction quality management is being managed, that there's a separate quality team as part of the construction group that's managing some of the installation requirements that don't necessarily relate to functionality, but if the pump has to be painted red, is someone verifying that is in fact red? If there is inspections for high voltage or medium voltage power related to installation, that the right quality control processes are taking place and that construction installations are being installed per contract requirements. So quality control and quality assurance are definitely two very important aspects that the construction group needs to manage before we get to static completion and before we move into our pre-commissioning and commissioning processes. So this is something we talk about very specifically in our Commissioning Academy program. I've got a few more points coming up on it here shortly in how to make sure that distinction takes place so that there's no confusion between third-party inspections before commissioning and our static completion and commissioning processes. So another one of our planning elements here is our commissioning software. We need to be defining what software we're going to be using, how it's going to be used, what are all the project groups' expectations for how they're going to be using the software. Do we have one or two key individuals from each group interfacing with the software, or is everybody going to have access to the software? Do we expect vendors to be into the software and submitting their documentation and results within the software? All of this needs to be defined up front in contracts well before we get to static completion, so that we know how our construction completion processes and commissioning processes are going to take place. As we've gotten further through our planning elements here, the next framework we're going to look at is our commissioning sequence. So how are our subsystems expected to be completed and in what order? And how is this all coming together in our commissioning schedule with regards to durations and dates so that we can load all of this into our commissioning software, giving a clear picture on what's required, when it's required, and who needs to be completing each of these items. Our next planning element is our forms and certificates, and you may be familiar with some of these forms and certificates that you've used on projects. But when I say forms and certificates, this doesn't really refer to like a paper copy of these documents. These are the forms and certificates that are used within our commissioning software to manage the milestones of our gated commissioning workflows. These are the forms or the certificates, and most importantly, who has authority to sign off on each of these milestones in our gated process. How are these forms and certificates being used to manage subsystems through our gated commissioning workflows? Next item is our checklists and procedures. So these are all very common. We've been preparing checklists, equipment checklists, and commissioning procedures for the longest time. But projects are just too fast paced and there's too much going on, that you can't be preparing checklists and putting together procedures while we're doing commissioning. All of our checklists and all of our procedures need to be prepared in advance on the shelf and ready to go, so that we can strictly focus on execution once we get to on-site commissioning. And commissioning software plays a huge role in that now too. Is if you get the right software, they have all the checklists and procedures built into there. If a certain type of pump, you look it up and maybe there's a couple parameters you're going to remove, a couple parameters you're going to add, but long gone are the days where you have to sit down and write a stack of paperwork of checklists to get. The software has all these functions, and we need to be leveraging the software to get these systems and documentation in place well in advance. And the last item, not because it's the least important here, but we need to be defining our commissioning safety processes. The commissioning team is relied on heavily as the equipment experts to start up this equipment. We need to be working closely with our HSC groups to define our pre-startup safety review processes, our test readiness reviews, meetings to ensure that everything is going to take place safely during our startup processes here, so that everyone can complete the work safely and celebrate the success of the project at the end. Godwin, could you please explain in more detail what you mean by control narrative with examples of how it's being used? So the process control narrative, or sequence document it could be called, is the text-based description of how the systems are expected to function. So an example would be a duty standby pump, a pair of pumps, and just in a simple text paragraph, the process engineers would define pump A needs to run for 1 minute, and then it needs to switch off. Pump B needs to then switch on and take over the flows, or however that, in a text-based explanation, process engineers want that particular piece of equipment to work. That's the defining document that then our logic experts would then take and program that logic within the PLC to make sure that the systems are controlled in that manner. There's definitely a level of interpretation there, and things can get lost in translation. That's why the commissioning team needs to be involved to make sure that nothing's getting missed. Process engineers need to be involved to make sure that the systems are actually being implemented how they want them to be. And we do have some examples of this, of process control narratives and functional requirement specifications, and how this works in our Commissioning Academy program, to give some examples there as well. Okay, so we've completed our planning frameworks. The next one is our construction completion frameworks, and there's 2 project management frameworks involved here. You would probably be familiar with punch list walkdowns, going through and identifying any of the punch items that might be outstanding from construction. But this is the formalized process to go through those punch list walkdowns in the field between construction and commissioning groups, and formally categorizing those as either type A, type B, or type C punches, to load these in our software to know what's still outstanding and when they need to be completed by subsystem. So however we've systematized the project earlier, we're doing a punch walk for each subsystem as it approaches static completion. So that's the second framework involved here for construction completions, is subsystem static completion. And this is an important framework to put in place as part of our planning processes, because this is what defines that line in the sand of what construction completion actually means. There's a lot of confusion on projects because this usually isn't defined very well. But by defining static completion in what's required for each specific tag, each specific physical piece of equipment, as well as the documentation that's required to achieve that static completion. When everything is fully defined for each subsystem static completion, there's no surprises. Everyone has a crystal clear view of what's required to meet that goalpost and knows what they need to do to achieve that particular static completion. Nothing gets missed, and the commissioning team has what they need moving forward once static completion is achieved for each subsystem. All right, then the third component here is, of course, our on-site commissioning and startup, and there's 6 frameworks that are involved there. So the aspects that are required for pre-commissioning, this would be our equipment level testing each component on its own. followed by our commissioning tests, which are more so our subsystem or system test, where we're expecting a group of equipment to function together as one subsystem. So once we get through those two levels of testing, we can then move into starting up the systems, introducing process fluids or first energizations for the first time, moving into performance verification, where we're verifying that once systems are operating with plant fluids for the first time, everything's performing as they need to or doing any fine tuning. Trial operation, where we're expecting systems to operate uninterrupted for a specific period of time. We can finally get to handover of the systems where we've determined or issued our final commissioning certificate saying that systems meet contract requirements and are ready for commercial service. All right, deep breath. We went through a lot there. There's a lot to take in, and there's a lot of steps to the process there. So I don't want to overwhelm over everybody. Let's just take a deep breath and go through some of the questions here in the chat. Do construction documents for subsystems get handed over in turnover dossiers to commissioning for the main system or handed over as its own dossier? So when I hear the word dossier, that might still be a legacy term related to like printed binders of documentation. And while that used to be how it was done, I assume that you're probably referring to our commissioning software in how the documentation is compiled and turned over to operations at the end of the project. So that is an important piece to define in our static completions. Typically, what I would ask for is a preliminary copy of O&M manuals at static completion, because we need the O&M manuals when we're working with a lot of these systems during pre-commissioning and commissioning, but invariably we're going to find something that needs to change and be updated in those manuals, right? So a preliminary O&M manual would be required at static completion, but any red line markups that are added to O&M manuals, for example, those need to be incorporated for final handover of O&M manuals at hand over that particular subsystem to operations. When it comes to test reports, those are generated, well, some of those would be generated through construction activities. If there's flushing activities or pipe pressure leak testing that was taking place as part of mechanical installations, then we want to see those test reports handed over during each static completion. QC checklists, absolutely. Completion of ITPs, we want to see all those documents as part of our static completion. Red line drawings, absolutely a critical component to be defined as part of our static completions. That's one of the most important documents, is to make sure that we have an as-left representation of what was installed in the field. I see way too often that everybody gets to static completion and says, yeah, everything's built, but we don't have any red line documents. Well, how are we going to work with that? How are we going to perform boundary isolations if we don't even know that a cable was installed, an additional cable was installed in the field? We need to have accurate red lines at static completion if we're expected to pre-commission and commission these activities safely to make sure that nothing gets missed. So hope that answers your question, but it's why static completion needs to be defined thoroughly and completely to address all of those items. It's not just fair to say, yeah, we need some documentation handed over, because different things are handed over at different times, depending on what they are and which milestone they associate with. All of this is defined in our commissioning software so that everybody knows crystal clear what's required and when it's required. If you're not planning these elements in your software, you're not defining what and when some of these items are defined, answering those three fundamental questions, right? What's required, when it's required, and who needs to provide it? Well, then cowboy commissioning is what you get. Okay, so the framework I've just described is the only proven way to complete capital projects. This is the only framework that will allow you to meet your project in service date. Project teams, of course, will try a lot of different methods, right? But none of them work, which is why 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget. What I've described is the only proven and reliable way to methodically complete complex projects, period, for all types of projects, for all industries. This is the proven method to complete projects. If you're not doing this on your projects, this is one of the main reasons your projects are late. Some people invariably ask me, well, what about Scrum, or what about Agile, or AWP, Advanced Work Planning, right? While these tactics are helpful for design and construction, they're not really for commissioning. Commissioning requires a different thought process. Commissioning requires a systems-based approach, and I think this is why there's confusion in the industry on what commissioning is really all about. The systems-based approach that is on the screen is the only proven process to methodically complete capital projects. So don't get distracted by some of that other project management jargon. It's not actually what you need to complete projects. Focus on the fundamentals with the systems-based approach that we are discussing today. All right, is this making sense? Let me know in the chat. Are you familiar with some of these frameworks? Are you becoming more of a believer in what's required to complete capital projects? Have you seen parts of this on your projects, or any of it? Have your projects been absent of some of these processes? Thank you. This is great information. Absolutely. Yep. This is powerful stuff when it's applied properly to projects. And when projects are missing all of this stuff, then that's why they're a shit show at the end. So for some context, let's look at a possible timeline. The bulk of the effort is really during commissioning planning frameworks. Let's say you have 6 months of commissioning. Well, that might mean that you have 18 months of planning that's required before commissioning. This was the case on one of my recent projects where we had a 6 months, actually a little bit more than that, commissioning process. I was involved in the project 2 years prior to that, just to prepare and plan all of this information to get ready for commissioning. Maybe you have a little bit smaller project. Maybe you have 2 months of commissioning at the end of your project. Well, your planning phase may be 10 months in advance. It also depends on when your feed processes are taking place as well. If it's 10 months, maybe it's 12 months or a little bit more, to make sure that you're capturing some of these processes during your feed processes. So when commissioning project management processes and frameworks are established early in your projects, completing construction and commissioning becomes much easier. You may have heard of the 80-20 rule, and when it comes to managing commissioning, this definitely applies as well. 80% of the work is done during the planning stage of projects for commissioning, and this is often what is missing on projects. When you get the first 80% right, the last 20% becomes so much easier. But when the first 80% is wrong or not done at all, like on a lot of projects, the last 20% will be a nightmare, and you will have cowboy commissioning. It's just too fast paced. There's too much information, and you can't possibly keep your head above water. So are these timelines making sense? Have you seen projects or been involved in projects where you've been involved a couple years in advance before commissioning is going to start, that you can focus on that 80% of the effort? Or have you seen that 80% of the effort skipped or tried to jam during the last 20% of projects? What's been your experience? What is your opinion of Exto? I'm assuming you're referring to the commissioning management software Exto. I haven't used it extensively, but it is one of the ones on the list there. I don't have any specific feedback, because I know that there is one commissioning management software in that list that stands out as the leading software that should be used, and we can discuss that a little bit more later. With the software, that timeline and documents required at all stages of commissioning are readily available going to the site commissioning. Yeah, all this advanced planning is definitely required if you want to finish your project on time. If you want to figure that all out during commissioning at the end, well, yeah, everything will take twice or 3 or 4 times longer than you expect, because you're stuck with cowboy commissioning. So let's look at a case study. These are 2 projects that took place at the same time in Canada. Now, these are fairly big projects. They're multi-billion-dollar projects, but if you're working on, say, a smaller project, a $5 million project, or these larger $5 billion projects, big or small, all of these lessons learned apply to all sizes of projects. Don't let the size of the project scare you or think this doesn't apply to your projects. This definitely applies. So the first project here is Bipole 3. It's a 2,300 megawatt HVDC link that we built in central Canada. So I was the commissioning manager for this project. And the project took place between 2015 to 2018. We delivered this project on time and on budget. At roughly the same time, on the eastern coast of Canada, the Labrador Island Link was taking place as well. This was a 900 megawatt HVDC link on eastern Canada, so a slightly smaller project, and it took place between 2012 to 2023. Now, there were lots of things wrong with the Muskrat Falls or Labrador Island Link project, and it actually resulted in a public inquiry in 2020. You can read all about the public inquiry if you want at muskratfallsinquiry.ca. But there's one thing I want to highlight: the difference between these two projects was the approach to integrated factory acceptance testing, the software development and testing that took place in the factory. So this is a headline from last year for the Muskrat Falls project. This is in March of 2022, March last year. And the headline says, as software struggles persist, consultants say Muskrat Falls completion is impossible to predict. This is a CBC headline, and that's not a good headline to have on your project. I would hate to have a project I was working on have a headline like that. In June of last year, this was the next, well, there were several CBC headlines, but this was another one I wanted to highlight, was software troubles blamed for $260 million Muskrat Falls cost increase. Not a good headline for sure. Even earlier this year, in March, you can see they were still having problems with the software. As the Newfoundland Hydro president optimistic about Muskrat Falls, despite discovery of new problems. And the problem they were having was that they were not able to transmit at full 900 megawatt capacity. The software was still only limiting them at half that capacity. So you can see late in the project, earlier this year, they were still having problems with their software. HVDC stability controls is quite complex, and you don't just figure this stuff out on site as you're trying to commission the project, but this is how it ended up. So with the software problems that Muskrat Falls was having early in 2023, we can only assume that their factory acceptance testing was only done on the hardware cubicles themselves. There couldn't have been any software integrated factory acceptance testing of the software and the hardware of those cubicles on site, because if there was, you wouldn't be seeing these issues, these software issues that late in the project. Now, contrast that to the approach that we took on Bipole 3. We had 6 months of dedicated integrated factory acceptance testing. There was 60 control and protection cubicles that existed on the project. There was 30 on the northern station and 30 on the southern station. We had all 60 of these cubicles all wired up in a simulated environment in Germany. And we spent a dedicated 6 months going through all the squiggly lines of all the full 2,300 megawatt transfers to make sure that these systems were going to work before they got to site. And this was all done 18 months in advance before our project in service date. So because of this proactive offsite testing, we were able to plan and target our in-service date July 1st of 2018, and we were able to hit this in-service date on time and on budget. So this is one of the major lessons that I took away between these two projects is, on any system that has any level of PLC controls, we need to be properly doing integrated factory acceptance testing of both the hardware and the software in the factory before cubicles leave site. We cannot be integrating software for the first time on site. Even on other smaller portions of Bipole 3 that took this approach and integrated software on site, there was nothing but problems. The software didn't work. There was equipment that was damaged. Months of delays and millions of dollars because the software was just not proven in the factory before it got to site. So this is one of the lessons learned I took away, is we need to be applying these more sophisticated approaches to our projects to properly test equipment, both hardware and software in the factory before equipment leaves to site. So we've covered a lot of great information here today. Let me know in the chat if everything we've discussed today, you're ready to follow this commissioning project management approach on your projects. Let me know that you will begin your projects with the end in mind. You'll prevent commissioning from being a sub-activity to an individual group, that you'll have everyone involved in commissioning, and that you'll stop using paper and spreadsheets on your projects. To correct these three mistakes, we've discussed how commissioning can be simplified into a three-part project management framework, right? The commissioning frameworks required to plan your project, the commissioning frameworks required for your construction completions, and your commissioning frameworks for your on-site commissioning and startup. Does this seem doable on your projects? Can you please go implement this? And if you're ready to go implement this on your projects, what are the first steps you're going to take next week to start implementing this? What I've given you today are the project management systems and controls that successful project teams use to complete commissioning and meet their project deadlines. What I've given you are the commissioning project management frameworks required if you want to avoid making costly mistakes on your projects, you want to avoid cowboy commissioning and the scramble at the end of projects, you want to avoid following outdated commissioning processes, and you want to avoid the consequences of a failed project. I don't want headlines like Muskrat Falls on any of the projects that I've worked on. Of course, we all want this. We want to get it right the first time. We want confidence with commissioning rather than gambling. We want to skip the 10-year learning curve so that you can get your project started the right way. And we want to start to be able to work on the biggest and best projects that we can. So right now, I figure you have two choices. You can spend the next decade trying to figure this stuff out on your own, and that is a totally legitimate way to go. That's what I did. I spent the last decade working on several projects, figuring out what works and what doesn't. You can continue with cowboy commissioning approach on your projects, and you can roll the dice and see how your projects turn out at the end. And you can learn commissioning project management by trial and error. Or you can get a project management approach to commissioning right now. You can get the project management systems and controls you need to successfully lead and manage commissioning. You can skip the 10-year learning curve, and you can set your projects up right away with the right CMS software to begin properly right from the start. So how does this sound? Do you want this for your projects? If option number 2 sounds like the better approach, then we've got a bunch of different ways that we can help you and your projects get this set up correctly. And I'll break it down for you just in a second, but after working with so many people on projects to get this set up correctly, we know the major problems and mistakes on projects that are causing problems with commissioning. And I do want you to schedule a meeting with me, and I can help you identify where the biggest mistakes are, or what are the biggest problems you're actually making on projects, to help you identify what you need to do to fix it. Or if this stuff is all new to you, like I saw some comments in the chat, I can show you what's required to get you up to speed fast. We can also have a conversation about whether or not I'm someone that can help you understand what's required for commissioning project management and how fast I can get you up to speed on commissioning best practices. So schedule a meeting with me at learncsu.com so we can identify where things are going wrong, what mistakes we can fix, and see if I'm someone that can help you. You can see my calendar and select a date and time that works for you at learncsu.com. Godwin is asking, in a situation where the project has been going for like 6 months without CMS software, and all of a sudden you were called in to handle CMS software responsibility, what would be your advice? Yes, that's common too, because sometimes commissioning guys aren't involved in the project early enough and contracts have already been awarded, right? So you can certainly get commissioning software set up during design processes or even during construction. It's not too late. I would say that if you're already running into your static completions and commissioning is expected to be taking place, well, that's probably too late. But anytime before static completion, yes, you absolutely want to pick the right software, start getting it set up, start loading it with your systematization, and it'll still be challenging to get people to use it and get people aligned with what's required. Lots of people will still try and fight it and want to do their old paper and spreadsheets way, right? But it's not too late to get it in place, because it still will help you manage your subsystems completions and commissioning processes to make sure that nothing gets missed. So definitely learn from us which is the right software and start applying it on your projects right away. So here's how we work with people. Our Commissioning Academy training program gives you the industry best practices for commissioning project management, gives you all the systems and controls you need to lead and manage commissioning. You get all the templates, all the procedures, all the forms and certificates, everything that you need. Plus, you get a systems-based approach through all phases of your project so that you can complete commissioning as efficiently as possible. You get the best CMS software for your projects, and you'll also understand how to use it. This is all so that you can cut the learning curve down so that you don't have to learn this over years and you can actually learn it in weeks so that you can get everything you need for commissioning project management in one easy to understand format. If you want all this now, then our Commissioning Academy Integrated Completions program is your best option. For those that require more guidance to implement commissioning project management on their projects, because a lot of the stuff is complex, we also do offer consulting services where we work directly with you and your project team to establish the systems and controls required for commissioning. And this is an option we can discuss when you schedule your call at learncsu.com. Connor's asking, what are your thoughts on starting commissioning before the system is fully mechanically complete? Example, instruments on pipes are not cables and energized, but vendor can start their skid. Yes, this is certainly possible. A lot of the vendor startups only require their individual pump, right? So if they've got what they need, a lot of those vendor startups will take place earlier. But this is how this all gets defined, right? In our inspection test plans, our static completions, and our pre-commissioning documents. So we write this all up and we define this all in advance of who's starting what and when to know on each side of static completion when it's taking place. And yeah, it certainly makes sense. If you're testing the pump standalone, by all means, if everything's ready to go, the pipes are in place and you got fluids to be able to run the pump, but you don't necessarily have the remote control systems back to the control room, absolutely. Fire it up, get her going. We can do bump tests. We can get some of those things checked out because the earlier we test things, the better, right? Test early, test often is a good philosophy to follow to make sure that any opportunity we have to test earlier, we want to write that into our plans to make sure that takes place, because if we can identify problems earlier, then we can fix problems earlier, right? And that's definitely a good approach on projects. Our Commissioning Academy program is the most comprehensive program for commissioning project management ever created. I have not been able to find any other information on how to prepare our commissioning project management processes. And that's one of the reasons I created this program, is because the information just does not exist for people to understand this stuff. Maybe it exists inside of a big company, inside of their private training programs, but it's not accessible to anybody else. There is no program out there that teaches you how to do this stuff. Our program literally closes the gap that exists on projects. Remember the gap that we identified in the project org chart at the beginning of this presentation? This program fills that gap and is the fastest method to get you up to speed with processes and software tools required for commissioning project management. Our program shows you exactly what you need for commissioning project management, the systems and processes to follow, the CMS software to use, and this is the missing piece of projects so that you can successfully complete commissioning. It's really painful for me to watch people struggle on projects without this stuff, because we know the solution. The answers are all right here. But without this stuff, people continue to struggle on projects until they learn over 10 years how to do this stuff. It drives me nuts, really. People don't need to struggle on projects. They need these commissioning project management processes to guide them to success. And this is the reason I created this program, to close the gap and stop people from struggling to complete their projects. Marcus is asking, when will be the next time we can sign up and attend? So our program is all online. You definitely want to book a call and have a chat with me now. I'll explain a bit here in a later, but timing is always an issue, right? You may not be able to take training right now. I get it. Projects are busy and there's a lot going on, but schedule a meeting with me. Let's have a discussion, because you at least want to secure your spot, even if you maybe are taking or planning on joining after the Christmas break or something. Then schedule a meeting. Let's have a chat and we'll see what's best for you. So our program is perfect for all levels. If you're a beginner, you get everything you need so you won't have to make any mistakes on your projects. If you're a project manager and you need to understand how to finish projects, and really, if you are the project manager, you should know how to finish your projects if that's your role on projects, or if you have a strong technical background and you want to move up in projects, then this program is your best option to get a massive head start when you understand these methods before starting projects. If you're an intermediate on projects, you have some commissioning experience, well, this is your opportunity where you can fix your cowboy commissioning. Your projects are probably late and over budget, just like most are, and you can actually apply commissioning project management to fix your cowboy commissioning. If you're an expert with commissioning and you've been involved with commissioning for a few years, then this is your opportunity to get a project management approach to commissioning to save time and money on your projects. You can fine-tune your processes and you can make your commissioning even easier. In addition to everything we've discussed today, you also get access to our 3 discipline modules. So maybe you have a really strong background in mechanical, but you're not quite as familiar with electrical or automation, or maybe you've got a really strong electrical background, but not as quite as familiar with some of the mechanical or automation systems. Well, we've got these 3 modules in here that goes over all the pre-commissioning and commissioning aspects that are required for each of these disciplines. So you get a flavor of everything that's required and how these systems all integrate together on projects. You get access to our checklist and procedure database. We've got over 180 checklists and procedures. Sometimes it's just helpful to have a template that you can start with to work with, to modify and make specific to your projects. There's several case studies in our program where you can see how a lot of these systems and processes apply to projects. You get access to our forms and certificates library. So for example, one of the first things you're going to need is a commissioning kickoff meeting agenda. Well, you go into the library, you pull out that template, you maybe make a few modifications to make it specific to your project, send that out to your meeting attendees, done, on to your next task. Save tons of time. You also get access to our private members LinkedIn group for people that are going through our training program or others that are working in the commissioning industry all over the world. It's sometimes helpful to bounce some ideas off others that are in the training program, or maybe you can find someone that's working on a project similar to yours on the other side of the world and bounce ideas off them and see what's working and what's not on their projects. It's sometimes when we're working in commissioning, it can seem kind of isolated. It's good to be able to have other commissioning experts working in the field where you can bounce ideas off of each other. We are accredited by EIC. So what this means is that when you complete the program, we're able to issue an accredited certificate along with the accredited CEU and PDH hours. This is all logged and registered at EIC registry, showing people that you've completed the program and understand fundamentals of commissioning project management. You get lifetime access. So if you're working on a project now, you can go through all this information. But if you're working on a project, say in 2 years from now, you still have access to all the resources, all the information, and you can still draw on all of the knowledge in the program to help you with any projects in the future. So remember at the beginning of this presentation, I promised you something special if you stayed to the end. Well, since you attended this webinar live, you can also get trial access to the #1 rated commissioning software. So there are over 20 CMS software systems to choose from based on the list that we looked at earlier, right? And people always ask me, well, which one to use? Well, I've reviewed all of them. I've attended a demo of each company's software. I've talked to each company. I've asked all the questions, and I've used some of these systems on projects. I've evaluated the capabilities of each software and determined which software has the features that you actually need for commissioning. Not all software has what you need, despite, of course, what each vendor will tell you. And some on that list actually can't be used at all because they're missing critical capabilities. So I've done all the research on what is the best software for you so that you don't have to do that research. And this is a huge time saver. Because I've done all the research for you, you don't have to spend weeks attending software demos, talking to a bunch of sales guys that don't really know anything about commissioning anyways, or trying to sort through all the sales jargon to determine what you actually need and what you actually don't need. I've identified the CMS software that can truly meet your commissioning needs. not just partially, but has full functionality to manage your commissioning workflows so you can get the work done. There is one best software that stands out from all the rest, and it's miles ahead of all the others. So what I've done is included trial access to this top-rated software in our Commissioning Academy program. And when you select a time to meet at learncsu.com right after this webinar, you not only get to learn what the best CMS software is, but you also get trial access to the software, and I'll show you how to use it on your projects. This trial access is not publicly available. You can't just go to this company's website and sign up for a free trial. This is exclusive access that I've arranged for you through our training program. And after I did all the research and determined which is the best software, I contacted them to get you trial access so you can actually get hands-on experience and check it out to help you understand commissioning project management and learn how to use the best commissioning management software for your projects. This trial access alone is easily worth the cost of the program, since you won't have to spend weeks trying to evaluate which software to use. You get trial access to the best CMS software, and you also learn how to use it. Godwin is asking, do you cover oil and gas construction projects in your training? Yep. So like I said earlier, this is the commissioning project management process to be followed on all projects. Of course, the technical commissioning is different on all projects, right? An oil and gas project and a power commissioning project or food processing plant, they're all going to have specific technical commissioning, but this is the only commissioning project management process that applies to oil and gas, power projects, process systems, everything. So this definitely covers what you need for oil and gas. So you need to go to learncsu.com, click the big purple button to select a time to meet. And if you schedule a meeting by the end of the day today, you can also get trial access to the best commissioning software when you enroll. So be sure to select a time today to meet, and we can meet anytime over the next few weeks and have a discussion. Anything that meets your schedule, you can get access to my calendar there, and you can pick a time that works for you, as long as you select a time to meet today. Now, if you don't need software access, that's okay too. I heard people earlier in the chat referencing other software systems, and if you're stuck or set on some of those, not everyone needs access to the software. That's okay. Not everyone necessarily needs to know what is the best software system because they're already using something else, and maybe you've made your own determination already, right? You can still get access to our training without the software trial. You can always reach out to me anytime and book a meeting to discuss our training without the software. I just don't want you to miss this trial access because this is pretty unique and it's something brand new to our training programs that we're just getting set up now, because it's a pretty amazing opportunity to get access to the best CMS software and also learn how to use it. So if you're interested in learning about the best CMS software, be sure to book a meeting with me today so we can meet and discuss. You can select your time today and we can meet anytime in the next few weeks on the date that you select. And if during our meeting you determine that I'm someone that can help you with all this stuff, you'll get trial access to the #1 rated commissioning software when you enroll. And I'll also show you how to use it. So go to learncsu.com to see my calendar and book a meeting today. So if you do have all of this figured out on your projects, and this is exactly what you're doing, you're following industry best commissioning processes and you're using the best commissioning software, then that's actually fantastic. You're on the right track, and please keep up the good work. We need to improve project performance, and you're one of the project leaders that are doing exactly that. I thank you for that, and we need more leaders like you. But I know that most project teams have not figured this stuff out, because the data tells me that 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget. So this tells me that projects don't have this stuff figured out and are still using outdated commissioning processes, or worse, still using paper and spreadsheets to manage commissioning. So if this stuff is all new to you, or if you've been part of a project that struggled with commissioning in the past, or you don't know which CMS software to use, or if you've been on this presentation multiple times, you've read through our emails, you've taken the mini course, and you need more, It means that you're still trying to figure out commissioning. It means you haven't been able to figure this stuff out on your own, and it means it's risky to your career and your projects to continue to try to figure this stuff out on your own. It's time to get support because this is complex and it takes a long time to learn. It took me 10 years to learn. Now, the support you need doesn't have to come from me. You can get support from someone else to help figure this stuff out, but you do need someone to show you how to do this. This is specialized project management. And if this is something you want to do, then you need a faster way than trying to learn this stuff on your own, because that's the only other option other than following the old, outdated standards that exist with paper and spreadsheets to track everything. Now, I do think it's possible for people to figure this stuff out on your own. I did. It took me 10 years of working on several projects to figure this stuff out on my own and get good at it. It's just that there's too long of a learning cycle, though, to figure this stuff out on your own. When a project takes 2 or 3 or 4 years to complete, it can take that long to see if what you did 2 years prior was actually the right thing to do to make commissioning successful. And with a 2 to 3 year learning cycle, it can take several of these cycles to get this stuff all figured out. 10 years is not uncommon. It's just not an efficient way to learn. The lessons are hard and slow to learn on your own, costing your projects lots of money, let alone the damage to your career when you don't get this stuff right. And if you select the wrong software, that's not a good situation either, because you could be stuck with it for years, because it's very hard to transition to a different system once you start using the wrong one. You're much better off to start with a system that you know can meet your needs than to learn 6 months after the fact or 6 months into your project that the systems you chose can't meet your needs. Now, a better way to learn this stuff is right here. And that's why I created this program, to bridge the gap that exists on projects, to break the industry norms of outdated commissioning processes, and get the right commissioning software in your hands so you can get everything you need with just the click of a button. Please don't waste the next 10 years trying to figure this stuff out on your own or be stuck with the wrong software, making costly mistakes along the way, costly impacts to your projects, costly impacts to your career. Think of the Muskrat Falls project. Do you want that on your resume? I certainly don't. It's not very good when you're looking for your next project when someone looks, oh, that was your last project? Pass. You can get everything right here and get your projects set up right the first time. Now, for those of you that are ready to get a massive head start with commissioning project management, go to learncsu.com and select a time to meet with me. You can see my calendar to select a date and time that works for you. And when you book a meeting today, you'll get trial access to the best CMS software when you enroll. During the meeting, we'll identify where things are going wrong with your commissioning on your projects, what mistakes we can fix, and we'll see if I'm someone that can help you on your projects. You can see my calendar and select a date and a time that works for you at learncsu.com. I'm looking forward to helping you and your projects succeed with commissioning. Okay, awesome. How's everybody doing? I've got some time now for some additional question and answers. If anybody has any questions, shoot them in the chat. I'll watch for your questions. And while you're doing that, these are some of the common questions that I often get at this point in the presentation. People always say, well, just tell me the best CMS software to use. That's all I need. And while I could tell you the best software to use, the one that I use and the one that I recommend all my clients to use, that's actually not going to help you. Out of the box, the software isn't much use. It's a tool that needs to be properly applied to projects, right? And I see so many projects using software incorrectly that's actually hurting projects rather than helping projects. It's very similar to flying an airplane. I can't just tell you to go fly a 737. You'll be staring at a bunch of controls and have no idea which button to push. You, of course, need to understand the details of how to operate the plane before you're going to be able to get off the ground, right? So on a Commissioning Academy program, you not only get to learn what is the best software, but you also get trial access so you can see the software firsthand. And I'll show you how to use the software so you can get the most value from it on your projects. So be sure to schedule a meeting at learncsu.com to get trial access to this software. Another question I often get is maybe you're still not convinced that systems and controls for commissioning can actually help you on your projects. And one thing I can guarantee is that without commissioning project management, it's a gamble. You're rolling the dice. Your project may be successful, but the data shows me that it probably won't be. And that's not good for you, your projects, or your company. However, when you implement these systems and controls for commissioning, you're much more likely to achieve your project objectives. You actually have the ability to control your project outcome during commissioning. You reduce the risk of your projects being late and over budget. It's just good risk mitigation, both for you and your project. So Connor is asking, does the software connect with a scheduling software like Primavera? Yes, most of them do. And every software vendor will tell you that they do. Some of them do this well, some of this do this poorly, but I've actually only found one that does a decent job of integrating the time component schedule into commissioning management software. Often there's spreadsheets that are being imported and exported between the software and Primavera, but when you actually go to use it on a day-to-day basis, it's useless. Great, you can import some dates from Primavera, but how are you actually using those dates? How is that software actually helping you manage the work? And it's not. So that's why I say you can cut through the jargon. Every software vendor will tell you it implements interfaces with Primavera, but is it actually useful? Does it actually help you complete the work? And the answer is, on some of those systems, no, it doesn't. So Mohammed, thanks for the amazing webinar. The software covering only the commissioning workflow or other commissioning phases workflows as well. So a lot of construction groups like to use their own construction management software like P-Core or other things like that. And it can get difficult to tell them, no, you're not going to use that. You're going to use a different system. So you're probably going to have a construction software and a commissioning software. Some of these commissioning softwares can be used from start to finish of a project, and even through after the project through asset management and operation aspects. There's really only one that I found that can span all aspects of the project. But realistically, you're probably going to have other software systems being used because there's other groups working on your project that have their systems and processes for how they manage design and how they manage construction. But everything that we've talked about here and static completion, integration with our construction completion processes is why it's critically important to define that, because the outputs from your P-Core or your construction groups or whatever processes they're using must and need to align with the commissioning processes that we're using in our commissioning management software. So that's that one. Dan is asking, thank you for your time and presentation. I've set up a time next week on your calendar. That's awesome. We could benefit from a program like you often to help our new people cut down the learning curve, build confidence, and improve retention. Absolutely. And that's the goal here, right? Is a lot of new people, the younger groups that are joining projects, they expect to be using these types of systems, right? When they hear that you're still using paper and spreadsheets, well, that's old and outdated. That's not how they live their lives, right? They've got an app, they've got a system, they want to see a structured process. And even in the recruitment and retention processes, if you can show people that you're using these software systems, that's what they expect to see. If instead you've got your old and wise commissioning expert with 40 years of experience that's still set on using paper and spreadsheets, well, that turns a lot of the younger generation away, as they're not, that's not how the world works these days, right? They want to see that companies are progressing and adopting these new technologies and new ways of working to join the companies that are leaders in this area. How long will it take to complete the training? So the training is flexible to take at your own pace. It's online. We typically find that people complete it in about 5 weeks, and that's completing it part-time during the week, maybe 4 or 5 hours each week. You can certainly go through it a lot quicker than that if you want to spend full-time days going through it, or if you pick away at it a little bit slower, it would take a little bit longer. But the flexibility is there that you can take it at your own pace, because what we found is we used to try and have structured dates for times and training to have people show up in, but nobody could show up, right? Projects are busy and nobody can commit to a time at, say, Monday at 2 o'clock to make a meeting to go through this stuff, right? So it's all online, it's all flexible, you can take it whenever you want, and that's the only way you're going to learn commissioning management software anyways, right? Because the systems are online. So you can go through it at your own pace, as fast or as slow as you like, but we find that most people complete it in like 4 or 5 weeks. So some of the other questions I hear is, I don't need commissioning project management. We have third-party commissioning coming in later, or we have consultants that are looking after commissioning and they'll take care of everything. I don't need this stuff. Well, while you may have very smart technical commissioning experts involved, I can almost assure you that you're not getting the commissioning, the commercial and project management aspects of commissioning that you need. And it's just not their role, right? They do technical commissioning, not commissioning project management. These groups of course, are great at technical commissioning, but they're not addressing the commissioning project management aspects that you need for technical commissioning to be successful. And by the time these groups are involved later in your project, you've already missed your opportunity to properly plan for commissioning. So if this is your understanding that your third-party commissioning group or your consultant is going to manage all of this, let's have a chat, book a call with me, and we can see if there's any other gaps in what you think you're getting from these groups. Select a time to meet with me at learncsu.com, and we'll see if there's any gaps that you think may be filled, but they're not. Connor's asking, do you think commissioning provides a great lessons learned to the engineering design team for future projects? It absolutely does, yeah, because you hear the guys on site, they're always complaining, oh, those damn engineers, the guys in the office, right? They don't know anything about what's going on projects. But it's not helpful to just be complaining about some of those groups. We need to bridge that gap and help everyone understand how to work as one team to finish these projects, right? And those are the frameworks that we put in place here to bridge those gaps, to help those lessons learned from the guys at the end of the project during commissioning and startup and operations, have that feedback go to earlier groups in the project, the design guys that are putting out some of these designs, and lessen that divide between those groups so that everybody can collaboratively work together and get the knowledge and expertise needed to complete these complex projects and have better project outcomes. One question I got on this webinar a few weeks ago was, why do I need commissioning project management? I'll just go get my PMP instead to manage projects. That's where the Project Management Institute, they have all this information. And when you look at PMI's information, it's pretty light on details on how to finish a project. A lot of what you'll find in PMI is all good stuff, but it covers more so how to start a project. It briefly covers quality management, but there are no project management frameworks included for commissioning project management. I know why PMI does that, because they're looking at project management for a broad range of projects, right? They would be covering project management for IT projects or civil projects that have no commissioning component whatsoever, right? But that's the missing piece that's in there, is on capital projects, the commissioning project management frameworks required to complete projects, and the stuff I help people with isn't included in PMP. This is the missing part of what's required to actually finish capital projects. You actually need the full picture. You need project management, PMI's portion on how to start projects, and construction quality management, but you also need to know how to finish projects during commissioning. So to help with this, I've also included 5 PMP practice exams in our Commissioning Academy program as well. So this gives you a flavor of what's in PMI, or if you're going to be writing your PMP exam, then you've got 5 practice exams. That's actually the best way to prepare for the exam, is write a bunch of questions. So we've got 5 PMP practice exams in there that will help you as well. So you can see what is required to start projects and get all the information that you need to finish projects. Maybe this all sounds good to you, but you're not sure that your organization can implement this. And one of the earlier comments on you're making me a believer, that's probably stemming from the bureaucracy component of how do we do this on projects, right? Is you think this is a great idea, but how do you get everyone else on board to think this is a good idea as well, right? And I get it. Organizational change is definitely difficult, but that's why I created this program for you, is to help you and to help others get this done on your project, to make this transition as easy as possible for you and your organization. What we really want to do is avoid cowboy commissioning, right? And get this done on projects for better project outcomes. And if you need more help, let me know during our meeting. We do offer consulting services to provide more guided support for your organization to get this set up on your projects. We can discuss this during our meeting when you book a meeting at learncsu.com. I do hear people say, well, And this is kind of alluding to the oil and gas question is, this doesn't apply to our projects, or this doesn't apply to our industry. We do commissioning differently. And of course you do commissioning differently. All projects do technical commissioning differently. Every project has unique circumstances, even projects within the same industry, from one oil and gas project to the next oil and gas project. All technical commissioning is different. The breakers to close and the valves to open, they're always project specific. The technical commissioning aspects are always different. No two projects are the same. However, the systems and controls for commissioning project management are always the same, regardless of the technical details. And this is what's missing on projects. The same steps need to be taken for everything we've discussed today on all projects. It's always the same risk-based approach to manage commissioning so that your project-specific testing goes well. The certificate, is it one for Hall program, or I get one for each, like mechanical, electrical, etc.? We have one completion certificate in our program for when you complete the final exam in the program. If you pass it with 80% or higher, then you can receive a certificate completing, stating that you've completed the program. However, I wouldn't get too hung up on the certificates. When people will complete our program and then they go for job interviews and they call me after the fact that they got the job, not once has anybody ever told me, oh yeah, I showed my certificate and they gave me the job right away. It doesn't work that way. The certificate might get you the interview, but what interviewers want to see is that you understand this stuff. So my recommendation is, yeah, you'll get a certificate at the end, but focus on the knowledge in the program, because that's what's going to help you the most. When you can go to an interview and you can speak intelligently about how commissioning project management works, you'll probably know more than the interviewer does actually about this stuff. So don't worry about the certificate too much. Focus on the knowledge that you get from this program, because that's what will get you the job and that's what will make you successful on projects, not so much the certificate, because that's not what people are looking for. So this, I also heard another question earlier, is this might sound good, but now might not be a good time. And I get it, right? The holidays are approaching us. I've heard two approaches there is, yeah, the Christmas break's a great time to go through this program, get me signed up right away. But on the other side is maybe you're taking vacation or family and all the good stuff that happens over all the holidays afterwards might be a better approach to taking the program. Projects are busy. Maybe you just need to finish your project in 2-3 months from now. It's a better time, right? But I don't want that to be a reason that you miss out on this opportunity. So when you schedule a meeting today, we can meet to discuss our Commissioning Academy program. And if you determine that our program is a good fit for you, you can leave a deposit to get access to everything that we've discussed today and start training at a later date that fits your busy schedule. So if you leave a deposit today, then you can pick a date, say maybe February 1st is a better time for you to start the program. You can secure everything, you can secure our pricing, and you can start the program at a later day. You'll also be able to get trial access to our software by leaving a deposit as well. So that way you can leave a deposit to secure your spot now and take training later when it best fits your busy schedule. You get the best of both worlds. So that's something we offer as well. Okay, so if there's any other questions, shoot them in the chat. But we're well past our time here. So if there's no more questions, go to learncsu.com and select a time to meet with me right away. There are time slots to meet later today or any date that you see in my calendar at learncsu.com. And if you do have any other questions, I can address them during our meeting. And remember, you must schedule a time to meet by the end of the day today if you want to get trial access to the #1 rated commissioning software. So go to learncsu.com right away to select your time to meet. I'm here to help you lead and manage commissioning for your projects to benefit you and your career, to benefit your projects, and to benefit the global challenges that we all face together on completing capital projects. So a few things before we conclude. Watch your email. I'll send you the link to my calendar so you can select a time to meet. I'll also send you a link to this replay, and feel free to share it with anyone else that you think should hear this commissioning project management message. I'm looking forward to helping you succeed with commissioning. Thanks for joining, and I hope to chat with you soon. Bye for now.